Avoidants don't panic when you're emotional, they panic when you're calm. And that sounds backwards until you understand what your emotions actually signal to them. When you're emotional, you're still attached to the outcome. When you're angry, pleading, explaining, asking, "What are we?" sending the second message, trying to make sense of their distance, you are still participating in the relationship dynamic. You are still reachable. You are still predictable. Your emotions, even the messy ones, give the avoidant information, and information gives them control. Control is their comfort zone. Control is how they regulate their nervous system when intimacy starts to feel too close. Think about how this works in real life. An avoidant pulls away. Their phone goes quiet, their energy changes, they act busy, vague, cold. For you, that triggers fear, and fear makes you move toward them because your nervous system wants safety. You ask for clarity, you try to fix it. You try to reconnect quickly so you can stop the anxiety. But for an avoidant, your pursuit has a strange effect. It calms them. Not because they enjoy hurting you, but because your pursuit reassures them they still matter, they still have access, they still have influence. It tells their nervous system, I can create distance and this person will close it. That is predictable. Predictability feels safe to them. So even when they complain that you're too emotional, what they often mean is, your emotions are demanding closeness. But the deeper truth is, your emotional pursuit still proves you're not leaving. Now here's where calm becomes terrifying to them. Calm is when you stop feeding the loop. Calm is when you don't rush to explain yourself. Calm is when you don't ask 10 questions trying to get reassurance. Calm is when you don't chase their silence with more words. Calm is when you respond with steadiness, or you don't respond at all, and you keep living. Calm is when your energy doesn't spike just because they pulled away. Calm is when you don't punish them, but you also don't chase them. Calm is when you stop performing emotional labor to keep the connection alive. And that calm creates something the avoidant hates: uncertainty they cannot control. Because avoidant attachment often relies on a specific emotional routine. They get close, their system starts to feel exposed, they pull away to regulate. You move toward them to repair, they feel relieved and return a little, then intimacy rises again and they repeat the cycle. That cycle becomes a regulation strategy. It's not love, it's nervous system management. And your reactions are part of what makes their strategy work. Your chasing reduces their fear of loss. Your explanations reduce their discomfort. Your reassurance reduces their shame. Your pursuit becomes the cushion that lets them stay avoidant without losing the relationship completely. So when you become calm, you remove the cushion. You remove the predictable response they depended on. You remove the emotional data they used to read you. You remove the proof that they can always come back and find you waiting. Calm doesn't give them a clear target. Calm doesn't give them drama to react to. Calm doesn't give them a fight they can use to justify distance. Calm doesn't give them the comfort of knowing exactly where they stand with you. Calm makes them face the possibility that you might actually be done. And for an avoidant, that possibility is a threat because it's out of their control. That's why calm triggers their scanning behavior. They start watching your patterns. They start checking if you'll post. They start noticing if you stop viewing their stories. They start reading your tone for clues. They start sending casual messages that aren't casual at all. Hey stranger, who just checking in? Those are not always love letters, they are tests. They're trying to gather information so they can restore control. They want to see if the old version of you is still available. They want to see if one small message can still open the door. They want to confirm you're still emotionally accessible. Because emotional accessibility is what makes them feel safe without having to commit. And here's the painful part, many people misread this. They think they're finally waking up, they finally care. Sometimes, yes, it can be the beginning of awareness, but the more accurate way to read it is, your calm made the dynamic honest. Your calm forced their nervous system to feel consequence, not punishment, consequence. Consequence is the feeling of, I might lose access to something I took for granted. And consequence is what breaks avoidance's illusion of control. Now, this keynote is not telling you to act calm as a tactic. Avoidance can sense performance. They may not call it out, but they feel it when you're calm as a mask designed to provoke them. That's still attachment. That's still you being moved by them. Real calm is different. Real calm is when you stop needing a reaction. Real calm is when you stop negotiating with someone's inconsistency. Real calm is when you decide your peace is not up for trade. Real calm is when your nervous system becomes loyal to you instead of loyal to the chase. Because the most powerful part isn't silence itself. It's the energy behind it. When you stop being emotionally available to chaos, you become unpredictable to someone who depended on your predictability. When you stop filling the gaps, you expose the gap. When you stop explaining, you let their behavior speak. When you stop chasing, you force the truth to the surface. Either they grow and meet you with clarity, or they fade because they only wanted you in a dynamic they could manage. That's why avoidants panic when you're calm. Your calm is not just a mood, it's a boundary. It's a statement that says, I'm not reacting on command. It's a statement that says, I won't be pulled into the old loop. It's a statement that says, I can love you and still choose myself. And to an avoidant nervous system that's used to regulating through control and distance, that is the moment the ground shifts, because the relationship is no longer something they can control with a withdrawal. It becomes something they have to earn with consistency. What changed is not that you suddenly became colder, it's that you stopped being manageable, and to an avoidant, that feels like losing the one thing they rely on to feel safe, control. For a long time your love was predictable. Your heart was predictable. Your availability was predictable. Even when you were hurt, you were still there. Even when they pulled away, you still tried. Even when they gave you the bare minimum, you found a way to understand it, justify it, stretch it into hope. And that predictability didn't make them respect you more, it made them comfortable. Comfort is not the same as commitment. Comfort is not the same as care. Comfort, in an avoidant dynamic, often means I can withdraw and the connection will still be waiting. That's how the relationship becomes a system. They pull away, you close the distance. They go quiet, you fill the silence. They become vague. You ask better questions. They act unsure, you offer reassurance. Your love becomes the bridge that carries the relationship every time they step back. And after enough repetition, they don't just expect the bridge. They assume it. They assume your forgiveness. They assume your softness. They assume your patience. They assume that no matter how confusing they are, you'll still be emotionally reachable, because you've trained them with your consistency to believe you will always restore the connection. Then something shifts in you, and it might not even be dramatic on the outside. You don't have to announce it. You don't have to rage. You don't have to block them. It's quieter than that. You stop chasing. You stop explaining. You stop over-offering. You stop reacting on command. Your energy becomes calmer, and that calm is not empty, it's firm. It's the calm of someone who finally realized, my love is not a guarantee. My presence is not a right. Access to me is earned. And the moment your love stops being guaranteed, you become powerful. Because for an avoidant, power is tied to predictability. They feel safe when they can predict how close you'll stay, how quickly you'll respond, how much you'll tolerate, how easily you'll forgive, how hard you'll fight to keep them. When you are predictable, they can keep you in a certain position in their life without fully choosing you. They can regulate their fear by keeping one foot out, because they're not truly at risk of losing you. You'll protest, yes, but you'll remain. You'll cry, yes, but you'll still answer. You'll be hurt, yes, but you'll still hold space. So they keep the comfort of connection without the pressure of full responsibility. But when you stop being predictable, they lose that safety net. They can't tell if you'll respond the same way. They can't tell if the old tricks still work. They can't tell if the door is still open. They can't tell if you're still emotionally attached to the outcome. And the reason that destabilizes them is because avoidants often depend on certainty of access more than they admit. Not certainty of commitment, certainty of access. They like knowing you're there, even if they're not acting like they've chosen you. They like knowing they can return and be received. They like knowing the connection is available on their terms. That availability makes them feel powerful without having to be vulnerable. So when you become less available to the old pattern, they start feeling the risk. They start feeling the possibility of losing access to something they assumed. And that's when your power becomes visible to them, not because you're playing a game, but because you're no longer participating in theirs. This is why your unpredictability hits their ego, because the avoidant ego is often built on control through detachment. They don't want to need, they don't want to chase, they don't want to be the one who's emotionally exposed. They want to be the one who can leave and return without consequence. They want to be the one who sets the pace. And when you stop responding the same way, you remove their ability to set the pace alone. Now the pace is mutual. Now your standards matter. Now your silence has meaning. Now your absence creates consequence. And it's not just their ego, it's their attachment system. Their attachment system is used to you being the stable point while they oscillate. They move in and out, you stay. They test, you reassure. They withdraw, you chase. That's the pattern that kept their nervous system regulated without requiring them to grow. Your predictability was part of their regulation. So when your predictability disappears, their nervous system feels unregulated. They get restless. They get curious. They start scanning. They start trying to pull you back into the old loop, because the old loop is familiar, and familiar feels safe. This is why you'll often see them reach out the moment you truly stop feeding it. A message appears, a soft check-in, a vague hope you're doing okay, a random meme, something that looks casual but isn't. It's a test to see if they still have access. It's a test to see if you're still manageable. It's a test to see if your love is still guaranteed. And if you respond instantly with full warmth like nothing happened, the test confirms nothing changed. The power dissolves and the pattern continues. But if you respond with calm boundaries, or you don't respond, or you keep your energy steady and self-respecting, the test fails, and that's when they realize you are not in the same position anymore. The deepest part of this keynote is that your power is not in being hard, it's in being firm. It's not in being mean, it's in being clear. It's not in being unpredictable for drama. It's in being unpredictable because you stopped allowing access to be automatic. You stopped letting your heart be a place someone visits whenever they feel lonely. You stopped treating crumbs as proof. You stopped making their confusion your responsibility. And that shift is terrifying to someone who depended on your predictability to avoid accountability. Because now, if they want you, they can't just hover. They can't just test. They can't just pull you close for comfort and push you away for control. Now they have to show up. Now they have to repair. Now they have to be consistent. Now they have to risk vulnerability. And whether they rise to that or not, the moment your love stops being guaranteed is the moment you stop being controlled by their unpredictability and start living from your own. The pattern you broke is the one that quietly controlled you for longer than you want to admit. And it wasn't just a relationship pattern, it was a nervous system loop. They pull away, you chase. They go cold, you warm it up. They disappear, you overthink, you reach, you explain. You try to fix. The silence like it's a misunderstanding instead of a strategy. And every time you did that, you weren't just showing love. You were teaching them something. You were teaching them that distance works, that pulling away creates pursuit. That withdrawing creates reassurance, that confusion creates effort from you. You were teaching them that they could regulate themselves at your expense, because your chase became the cushion that softened the consequence of their behavior. An avoidant doesn't always pull away because they want to hurt you. Often they pull away because closeness activates fear, and fear makes them reach for control. Control is their safety. Control is how they breathe. If they can control the pace, control the level of intimacy, control when things get serious and when things go quiet, they don't have to feel vulnerable. And your chasing, even if it was loving, even if it was well-intentioned, gave them that control. Because when they pulled away and you chased, the power stayed in their hands. They could disappear and still feel secure that you'd be there. They could go silent and still receive proof of your attachment. They could offer crumbs and watch you turn them into a meal. That is not romance, that is reinforcement, and reinforcement is what turns a pattern into a habit. And here's the part most people miss. The pattern isn't only emotional, it becomes chemical. Their withdrawal spikes your anxiety pushes you to reach, their return gives you relief, and relief feels like a reward. Your brain learns, if I try harder, I get relief. If I explain better, I get closeness back. If I stay patient, I get the version of them I miss. That reward cycle is addictive, and the avoidant benefits from it because they can keep the relationship alive without fully committing to the responsibility of steady love. They can be the thermostat. They can raise closeness when they want warmth and lower it when they feel exposed. That's why it feels like you're always adjusting yourself to keep the connection from breaking, because you were. So what changed? You broke the loop. Not with drama, not with a speech, not with a final fight. You broke it by doing the one thing that removes control from an avoidant. You stopped reacting the same way. You stopped chasing the pullback. You stopped doing emotional labor to repair what you didn't break. You stopped translating their silence into "they're overwhelmed" and started translating it into "this is not safe for me." You stopped giving reassurance in exchange for crumbs. You stopped making their mood the weather of your life. And the moment you did that, their control disappeared because the entire system depended on your predictable response. This is why they start realizing how powerful and unpredictable you are. It's not because you became chaotic. It's because you became unhooked. And when you become unhooked, you become unreadable to someone who used to read you like a map. Before they knew exactly what would happen if they disappeared, you'd show up with questions, with softness, with a long message, with patience, with proof you still cared. They knew they could reset you with one small return. A meme. A late night miss you. They knew you'd open the door. But now the door isn't automatic. Now they can't predict the outcome. Now your absence isn't a tantrum, it's a boundary. Now your calm isn't weakness, it's strength. Now they're not dealing with your emotions, they're dealing with consequences. And consequences do something to an avoidant that your chasing never could. Your chasing gave them relief. Consequences give them clarity. When you stop chasing, the empty space stays empty. They feel the gap they created. They feel the lack of access. They feel that you might actually move on, not to punish them, but because your self-respect finally outweighed your attachment to the story. That uncertainty hits their nervous system hard. It triggers scanning. It triggers hovering. It triggers testing. Because now they need information, they need proof, they need reassurance. And the only way they used to get that reassurance was by pulling away and watching you chase, but you're not chasing anymore. So they test you. They poke the connection lightly. They send something vague. They reappear like nothing happened. They act casual to avoid vulnerability, because vulnerability would mean admitting they care, admitting they lost control, admitting they misjudged you. And this is where your new power either becomes permanent or collapses back into the old pattern. Because if you respond the old way instantly, emotionally, fully, like the past never happened, you teach them the same lesson again. Distance still works. But if you stay steady, if you keep your response calm, if you require clarity, if you don't reward vagueness, you force a new lesson. Access requires consistency, and that lesson changes everything. Because now the relationship can't run on push-pull anymore, it can only run on growth. The pattern you broke is the pattern that made you feel like you had to earn love through effort, and the moment you stopped earning, you started observing. And observation is the most dangerous thing to an inconsistent person, because it exposes what they were hoping you'd keep excusing. Your silence hits harder than any argument because it removes the one thing an avoidant depends on to feel secure without having to fully show up: emotional certainty about your availability. When you argue, they may look indifferent, but they still get something from it: information. They can read your tone. They can predict your next move. They can tell you're still invested. They can tell you still want answers. And as long as you want answers, you're still in the game. You're still engaged. You're still reachable. That reachability is what keeps an avoidant regulated. It tells their nervous system, even if I pull away, this person is still here. It tells their ego, I still matter. It tells their attachment system, I still have access. Silence changes everything because silence removes information. Silence removes the feedback loop. Silence removes the emotional data they use to track you. And what an avoidant cannot track, they cannot control. And what they cannot control, they fear. That's why your silence is so disruptive. It's not punishment, it's not drama. It's not a manipulation tactic. It's simply the absence of your usual emotional availability. It's the moment they realize, I don't know where I stand anymore. And for someone who has relied on keeping relationships slightly uncertain but controllable, not knowing where they stand is terrifying. When you used to react, they could measure you. They could test you with distance and see how fast you moved toward them. They could send a vague message and see how much warmth you still offered. They could disappear for days and see if you'd still be waiting. They didn't need to commit to feel safe, because your predictability was the safety net. But when you go quiet, they lose the net. They lose the proof. They lose the predictable outcome. They lose the emotional map they used to navigate you. And the moment someone loses the map, their mind starts filling the blank space with stories, and those stories usually lean toward fear. This is why avoidants often start scanning the moment you stop being emotionally readable. They start watching your online behavior. They notice you stop viewing their stories. They notice you're not liking posts. They notice your reply time changed. They feel the shift even if you never announce it. And because they can't get direct reassurance, they try to gather indirect reassurance. They check, they hover, they look for signs. This is not always conscious manipulation. Often it's a nervous system trying to regain stability. They want to know if you're still attached. They want to know if you're still an option. They want to know if one small message can still pull you back into the old dynamic. That is why silence creates curiosity, because curiosity is the mind's attempt to reduce uncertainty. And here's the real reason silence hits them harder than any argument. An argument still centers them. An argument still makes them important enough for you to fight with. An argument still gives them your emotional energy. Your silence is you turning your energy back toward yourself. Your silence is you refusing to volunteer your heart as a place they can enter and exit whenever they feel like it. Your silence signals independence. It signals self-respect. It signals that you may be moving forward without needing their permission or their closure. And that is the exact moment they start realizing how powerful you are, because power in relationships is not who can talk the most. It's who can remain steady without collapsing into anxiety. Now, this keynote also explains something that confuses so many people: why avoidants return when you stop chasing. When you chased, they felt in control. They could pull away and watch you close the distance, which reassured them. But when you stop chasing, they feel the loss of control. And the loss of control triggers their pursuit. So they reach out. They send casual messages. They test the waters. They may even become affectionate again. But you must understand what's happening so you don't get fooled. Their reaching out is not automatically proof of maturity. It's often proof of discomfort. They are responding to uncertainty, not necessarily stepping into accountability. That's why your silence must be paired with your standards. Silence without standards becomes a game. Standards without silence becomes chasing. The balance is calm boundaries. You don't punish them. You don't beg them. You simply stop being emotionally readable to inconsistency. You stop giving people access to your emotional world when they refuse to offer you clarity. You stop explaining yourself to someone who keeps choosing vagueness. You stop negotiating for basic respect. And this is where your unpredictability becomes sacred. Not unpredictable like chaos, unpredictable like you're no longer available for the old script. They can't predict that you'll chase. They can't predict that you'll forgive instantly. They can't predict that you'll respond to crumbs with full intimacy. They can't predict that you'll still be waiting. And because they can't predict it, they start to realize something. They might actually lose you. Not because you're trying to make them suffer, but because you finally stopped suffering quietly. Your silence hits harder because it forces a choice. Either they come forward with clarity, repair, and consistency, or they lose access to the version of you who kept the connection alive alone. And that is the most powerful message your silence can send, not, "I hate you," but, "I respect myself." When an avoidant starts realizing you're not predictable anymore, they usually don't come back like a secure person would. They don't walk in with clear ownership, clear language, and a mature plan. Most of the time they come back with testing, hovering, and vague contact, because vague contact lets them reach for you without risking vulnerability. A clear apology would mean admitting they were wrong. A direct conversation would mean admitting they miss you. A real repair would mean admitting they hurt you. And that level of emotional exposure is exactly what their nervous system has trained them to avoid. So they choose the safest version of return, the kind that gives them information, attention, and emotional access without requiring them to fully show up. That's why it starts small. A random "hey," a reaction to your story, a meme, a quick "you're good," a comment that feels casual, a message that could be interpreted 100 ways. This isn't always intentional manipulation. Sometimes it's simply fear. They want to touch the connection without stepping into the weight of it. They want to see if you'll open the door without having to knock loudly. They want to know if the old version of you is still waiting behind the door, the version who responds instantly, explains everything, forgives quickly, and acts like the silence never happened. Because if that version is still there, they don't have to change. They can return and still keep control. Hovering is their favorite middle zone because it gives them comfort without commitment. They orbit your life instead of entering it. They watch your energy from the outside. They keep a thread attached, not to build, but to ensure you haven't fully detached. They might show up when they feel lonely. They might show up when they see you doing well. They might show up when they sense you're moving on. But notice the pattern. It's not consistent, it's reactive. It's not steady, it's triggered. It's not "I'm here to repair," it's "I'm here to test." And testing is not love. Testing is control dressed as curiosity. Because an avoidant doesn't only fear intimacy, they fear losing influence. Influence is how they regulate. Influence is how they stay emotionally safe. When they can predict you, they can relax. When they can't predict you, they feel exposed. So the tests start. They'll send a message and see how fast you respond. They'll say something slightly sweet and see if you melt. They'll bring up a memory and see if you go nostalgic. They'll say something vague like, "I've been thinking," and see if you chase the rest of the sentence. They'll disappear again and see if you follow up. Every test is a question their nervous system is asking. Do I still have access? Do I still matter? Can I still pull you back into the old loop? And this is where crumbs come in. Crumbs are small doses of connection that keep you emotionally engaged without giving you real security. A crumb is attention without accountability. A crumb is flirting without clarity. A crumb is contact without consistency. A crumb is "I miss you" with no change in behavior. A crumb is checking in, then vanishing again. Crumbs are powerful because they hit the part of you that has been starving. If you've been waiting for warmth, one warm message feels like water. If you've been craving clarity, one emotional sentence feels like proof. But crumbs don't build a relationship. Crumbs keep a pattern alive. The most dangerous part is how quickly crumbs can reset you. One small message can make you forget the weeks of distance. One nostalgic moment can make you doubt your boundaries. One little apology can make you hand over emotional access again. And that's exactly why the avoidant often prefers crumbs, because crumbs are low risk, high reward. They get the benefit of your softness, your attention, your emotional availability, without paying the price of consistency. They get to feel close without being responsible for closeness. They get to calm their loneliness without committing to your heart. So the real question becomes, what do you do when the crumbs arrive? You don't punish. You don't explode. You don't lecture. You don't become cruel to prove you're strong. You become steady. Steady is the language that breaks testing. Steady is what makes crumbs useless. Because crumbs only work on a nervous system that is still hoping. Crumbs only work when you're still hungry enough to accept less than you need. Steady means you respond in a way that requires adulthood. If they reach out vaguely, you don't chase the meaning. If they flirt without clarity, you don't reward it with intimacy. If they check in without accountability, you don't treat it like a reunion. You keep your energy calm and your standards clear. And here's the part that separates power from games. You don't become unpredictable to confuse them. You become unpredictable because you're no longer available for the old script. Your heart is not a place they can enter and exit whenever they feel like it. Your nervous system is not a playground for someone's fear. So if they want access, it has to come with repair. It has to come with consistency. It has to come with directness. Because the only way the avoidance stops hovering is when hovering stops working. The only way the tests stop is when the tests stop producing emotional reward. The only way crumbs stop is when crumbs no longer feed you. This is why their return style is so revealing. A mature return sounds like responsibility, not nostalgia. A mature return looks like steady effort, not reactive check-ins. A mature return is clear about intentions, not vague about feelings. A mature return doesn't ask you to pretend the past didn't happen. It asks what will be different now. And if they can't do that, then what you're seeing isn't love finally arriving. It's an avoidant trying to restore access without changing the pattern that made you leave emotionally in the first place. The final power move is not making them jealous, not posting for attention, not playing hot and cold back, not trying to win the breakup, because those moves still keep you tied to them. Those moves still make your life a reaction to their behavior. Real power is when you no longer need their regret to validate your worth. Real power is when you require repair, consistency, and directness, and if it doesn't appear, you keep moving forward anyway. That is what makes you unstoppable in an avoidant dynamic, because it removes the fuel that kept the push-pull alive. Your willingness to accept uncertainty as love. Avoidant dynamics survive on two things: your hope and their ambiguity. Your hope keeps you open. Their ambiguity keeps them safe. When you're hoping, you interpret crumbs as signs. When they're ambiguous, they can stay connected without being accountable. So the moment you decide, I will not build my life inside ambiguity, the dynamic is forced to evolve or collapse. And that's not a threat, it's reality. You are not punishing them. You are refusing to participate in a structure that harms you. Requiring repair means you stop accepting returns that skip accountability. Repair is not, I miss you. Repair is not, I've been thinking. Repair is not a meme at midnight. Repair is ownership. It sounds like, I know I disappeared. I know I shut down. I know I left you confused. I understand how that affected you. And then the most important part, here's what I'm doing differently. Repair includes a willingness to face the uncomfortable conversation without running. It includes listening without defensiveness. It includes acknowledging impact, not just intention. When you require repair, you stop letting them reset the relationship with charm. You stop letting nostalgia erase harm. You stop letting a temporary emotional wave become the reason you reopen your heart. Requiring consistency means you stop falling in love with spikes. Avoidance can be amazing in spikes. A spike is a sudden week of effort, a burst of attention, a surge of sweetness when they feel you slipping. Spikes are not stability. Spikes are often fear. Consistency is what happens when there's no drama to motivate them. Consistency is steady communication. Consistency is follow-through. Consistency is them showing up on ordinary days, not just in emergencies. Consistency is them not disappearing when intimacy rises. Consistency is them coming back after conflict instead of punishing you with silence. And here's the key: consistency is not a promise, it's a pattern. So when you require consistency, you don't hand them full access based on words. You watch behavior across time. You let the new pattern prove itself. Requiring directness means you stop rewarding vagueness. Avoidants love vagueness because vagueness is low risk. Vagueness lets them reach without committing, test without admitting, hover without building. Directness is what ends games. Directness is simple. What do you want? What are you offering? What will be different? Are you willing to rebuild intentionally? Directness doesn't mean interrogating them. It means you no longer accept the gray zone as a permanent home. You don't force them into commitment, but you refuse to stay in ambiguity. And that is where your power becomes real, because the gray zone is where avoidants keep people attached while staying emotionally safe. When you step out of the gray zone, you remove their advantage. Now, the most important part of this keynote is the phrase, or walk forward without needing their regret. Because so many people stay trapped waiting for one of two things, either for the avoidant to come back and finally choose them, or for the avoidant to feel pain, guilt, and regret that proves the love was real. And that second one is sneaky, because it feels like closure. It feels like justice. It feels like validation. But needing their regret keeps you tied to them emotionally. It keeps you watching, waiting, analyzing, hoping they'll feel what you felt, hoping they'll finally understand. That's still a bond, but it's a bond that costs you time. Walking forward without needing their regret means you detach your self-worth from their emotional development. If they never own what they did, you still heal. If they never apologize properly, you still move on. If they never change, you still choose yourself. This is the moment you stop being controlled by the story, because the avoidant dynamic often keeps you in a loop where you feel powerless and you try to regain power by getting them to see you, choose you, regret you. But the truth is, power is not getting them to feel something. Power is deciding what you will tolerate. And this is where the audience stays to the end, because everyone wants to know the move that ends the loop without turning you cold. The move is calm standards. Calm standards say, I'm open to real, not to vague. Calm standards say, I'm not punishing you, but I'm not available for disappearing. Calm standards say, if we reconnect, it will be built on repair and consistency. Calm standards say, if that's not what you want, I wish you well, and I'm moving forward. That is not cruelty. That is emotional adulthood. The reason this is so powerful is because it forces a clean outcome. If they are capable of growth, they will rise. They will meet you with clarity. They will take accountability. They will show steady effort. They will stop testing and start building. But if they are not capable, they will resist. They will stay vague. They will offer crumbs. They will try to pull you back into the gray zone. And in the past, you would have followed them there. But now you don't. Now you keep walking. That's the final power move. Your life stops being a reaction. Your heart stops being a revolving door. Your standards stop being negotiable. And whether they come back changed or not, you win, because you are no longer living inside someone else's fear. You are living inside your own self-respect.